So for my next guest, he's a former captain in the U.S. Air Force, founder of Men of Action program. He is the host of Michael Sartain podcast, and he's the only 46-year-old that I would switch bodies with. Welcome.
Hey, what's going on, man? It's good to talk to you, Faraz.
I was on your stories the other day, actually. I think it was like a day ago, and you were with Dan.
Yeah.
What is it like to hang out with Dan on a regular day?
So Bilzerian is interesting because it's like he is a down-to-earth dude. Like you can see if you read his book, like he talks about some of the things that happened to him growing up that were traumatic. You know, like for instance, like wanting, like his father was, kind of a spendthrift, but they were wealthy, and then his father going to jail, and like him wanting to feel like included and all this kind of stuff. And when you get to know him, man, he's a real dude. If you're in his circle, if you're not in his circle, like he just comes off like a force of nature, man. I mean, he's just like, it's really hard to explain. A force of nature is probably the best way to explain it. Like I've had people hit me up before and they know that I'm friends with them. Or like, hey man, I need you to set up a meeting between me and Dan. And I'm like, that's not how this works. I need Dan to be here at this time. I'm like, that's not how this works, bro. Like it doesn't, the plane takes off when Dan's ready. We start filming when Dan's ready. That's just kind of how it works, is that we kind of work, when you work with him, you're kind of on his schedule. But the reason why is, he's he runs a company. He runs several different companies, several different interests. And when you're making that much money and you have that many responsibilities, you can't judge when you have a friend like that. And I have a few other friends like that, like Dan, who are worth over $100 million. And you can't judge the way you would act and compare it to the way he should act. Does that make sense? Like for us, you and I don't go out and literally every 5 feet have dudes try to take pictures with us. I might get 2 a night, sometimes as many as like 8 on a night. Dan, it's 50, 60 a night, girls hitting him up like crazy. And so like his reality is just very different than other people. But one of the things that's kind of cool is like when we're at his place, he's playing chess, what I'm saying? We're playing in the fucking rec room, hitting baseballs or playing paintball. And it's just cool. And there's no girls around. Like a lot of times he has business meetings and there's no girls around. And Frauds, if like on my birthday, I have a birthday party where it's me and like 50 girls. And then a couple days later, I invite all the guys from MOA to come play basketball with me. So it's all dudes, right? That's what I usually do. My birthday's like on a Thursday. Thursday, it's all girls at Haksan or Zook or wherever, Tao. And then on Saturday, we all go hoop together. So that's just kind of been like my tradition, is like sometimes you want girl time and sometimes you want guy time. That's another thing that's unique about Dan. But yeah, man, it's really interesting. And man, he is super fucking fastidious about what he puts in his body. Bro, he's got a chef, like a fucking incredible chef. She's Guyanese and she is amazing. The stuff she cooks, every time we go to Dan's house, he feeds all of us, bro. And the stuff he eats is just fucking world class. That part is really interesting too. But like it's just an interesting time. It's the Dan with the girls. I've only done that maybe 5 or 6 times. Just Dan hanging out with the guys is usually how it is. And I like that too, because I like Dan as a person, not just like as a fucking social media celebrity. He and I get along for a myriad of reasons. We're both business minded. We're both prior military. And we both, I think, have a really, really strong fundamental understanding of female attraction. So I think that's why, we always have stuff to talk about when it comes to them. He's also really, really generous, and you're not going to know about it. You guys are not going to know about all the stuff he does for fucking amputees. He's not going to show you that shit. He's not going to show you the shit he does, the truckloads of toys he buys for kids. That's just not So, I do big like charities where I try to get people to join in. Dan does his stuff behind closed doors.
That's quite interesting. Like looking at Dan from the outside, it feels like he just doesn't care, right? He's probably putting whatever in his body, just hanging out, partying all the time. But that's very interesting. And I believe that. I think Dan is the type of guy that has a completely different persona, like publicly, but he's a different guy privately. And I do believe that he is the type of guy to, give kids a truckload of toys and give all because I remember I was listening to the podcast actually before this, and I think you introduced him as a philanthropist, and he was like, that's the first time I've heard that. That's quite interesting. Yeah,
but I knew he was. I've seen something he does at all his parties. He has amputees come to his parties, and he shows them the best fucking time, military amputees. And it's like one of the things where like I look up, of the things that I admire the most about him, that would be number one. And number two is the fact that he never turns down a photograph from anybody. But I admire a lot of stuff about him. But yeah, man, he doesn't. The other thing is that I've learned from Dan specifically is dopamine spikes. So Dan is aware that like when everything is a 5-star meal and every time he's with a girl, she's a 10 and it's a foursome, Like if after you do that, your dopamine spikes just don't work anymore. So Dan will go like several days being celibate, or several days he won't smoke. He does smoke weed. He won't smoke weed for a long time. Dan will go, like, he's very fastidious about his workouts. And bro, he loves these ice baths. I did an ice bath at his place last time. I made it 40 seconds. Dan sat in there for 5 minutes and it was 44 degrees outside. That ice bath was maybe a smidge above 32 degrees. And he was in there playing fucking chess while he was in the ice bath. So he's just super disciplined. And the other thing that it kind of reminds me is, like, I spend 95% of my time at home working. And I have cats. Dan spends 95% of his time at home working, and he has cats. Like, that's another thing that we kind of have in common. And then when we go out, this is another thing we have in common. When we go out, it is a blowout, fucking crazy lunatic affair where everything is incredible and wild. And we do it for like 1 or 2 days. Then we come back home and chill. Like that is something else I kind of learned from him.
Yeah, in his book, if you read it, well, obviously you read it. You were part of some of the stories. We'll go into that in a second. If you read his book, it's just, back-to-back highlights, right? So when I was reading it, I was kind of like, this is just ridiculous. But obviously you forget that these are just highlights that he put in the book. Obviously there's probably a lot of stories that he didn't put in the book, but I think those stories were probably stretched out, and you forget that he goes home and chills with his cats and dudes, and that's it.
You also forget about the stories that did happen. If you looked at all the girls who tried to sleep with him and couldn't, and you lined them all up, they would still be some of the most beautiful women you've ever seen in your life that tried to sleep with him. Because Dan, like we were joking about this last night, Dan does not like the big titty stripper look. He doesn't like that. I do. I fucking love that. So like, It's funny because like all those girls, they wanted to hook up with him too, and he wasn't having it. So it's really interesting. Like, if you were to line up every girl he never hooked up with, I mean, we're talking about fucking first team all NBA. It would be ridiculous.
So crazy. What has been like the craziest story that you were part of that maybe was not in the book, that you were part of? Yeah. With Dan.
To me, still one of the craziest things is going to his, it was like an Instagram post. Like, look at all the fucking bougie shit you see from all the girls trying to stunt on their ex-boyfriends at Art Basel this week. There was something, his parties were 100x that. I mean, it was like 7 or 8 girls to every guy. And like you weren't a legitimate IG model unless you were invited to that party. If you weren't invited to that party, it was just like such a low stat. Girls were going to that party to show that they belonged. It was like when you join the Marine Corps, you know what I'm saying? And they get the tattoo, the Marine Corps tattoo, because you belong, because you made it. It was like a IG model's rite of passage was to get into one of those Ignite parties. And so you go there and it'd be 7 or 8 girls to every guy. And then I was like, Bruce Buffer walks by me. Oh shit. There's who's the shooting guard for the Suns? Why can't I remember his name? Oh goddamn, I can't remember his name right now. I see there, and there's JaVale McGee right there. And then it was like Diplos, and then there's Jake and Logan Paul. And then it was like it was so crazy, like seeing the celebrities were there. But still, the craziest thing I've ever seen was I'm sitting in the room and nobody knew what was going on. And then Cardi B walks, bro, this is not an arena. It's his living room. She walks onto a stage they put there, and she just starts performing for like an hour. And we're just sitting there, like, some of us are stunned. Like, that is really Cardi B, like a few feet away from us. And then Cardi B leaves. It's 3:00 in the morning, and fucking Sway Lee just walks on stage and starts performing, and we're all singing with him. And Dan is nowhere to be found, bro. He is not even like enjoying this. And I'm looking to my left, and there's like Aoki, and over here is Diplo, and Diplo's at every one of these parties. And then like Marshmello will be there, but if you don't know what Marshmello looks like without his helmet on, you're not going to know it's him. But it was like, and everyone, by the way, every one of them played for free for Dan, except for Cardi B. Every one of them played for free. So that was probably one of the craziest things. It was like the full flex 10 out of 10, what you imagine like the wildest Instagram event would ever be. This was that. And there were 4 of them, and I went to 3 of them. I didn't make it to the first one, because the first one where Marshmello was playing. There were just 4 big parties. And that was probably some of the craziest stuff. Other than that, I'll tell you else, for us, it was repeatedly hanging out with him. There'd be a group of girls there. The girls would pull me to the side, and there was always one girl who said, I would never have sex with Dan. And then she would be the first one to have sex with Dan. It was like clockwork. 100%. I was like, that's the one fucking Dan, 100%. Like, it was so obvious. And by the way, Vegas Dave, Exact same thing. I saw the same thing happen with him. It was like the ones who were like, you don't like, if I don't want to sleep with a girl, do you know what I do? I just don't sleep with her. I don't tell anyone I'm not going to sleep with her. I just don't do it. For girls to sit there, you're in his house wearing his bikini, drinking his liquor and smoking his weed, telling me you're not going to sleep with him. Why don't you tell him that? Oh, you won't? Okay. And then she ends up having sex with him. And it's just one of the craziest things I've ever seen. And then the stories he'll tell us about, like, literally a girl complaining that her boyfriend cheats on her while she's literally cheating on her boyfriend with Dan, like that kind of stuff, like the hundreds of stories like that. Those are kind of crazy. But I think what Dan is, when you can study like the solar system, right? The in astronomy, you have a solar system like goes all the way up to the Kuiper belt, and in the solar system we can observe some things. And then there's a different type of astronomy, like cosmology, where you're talking about the edge of the universe, right? That's way further beyond the solar system. Dan, to me, is a study of the edge of the universe. Like, how far can things go? How far can pre-selection go? How far can fame go? I still live in the solar system, and I'm very aware of that. Like, Dan is 100x where I am. When I see that, it's just like, it's very interesting. Okay, do these principles still apply at a 100x magnitude? And I watch Dan, I'm like, okay, that still applies. Cool. Then let's try it here at my magnitude and see if it works. And of course it does work, because the things he does and the things I do are totally based in evolution. They're totally based in human evolution and natural selection.